Hey folks, I'm Mike. Do you hate ads? I hate ads. You know what I like? Patreon.com/inkdependence. It keeps this blog ad-free. Hello folks, welcome to inkdependence.com. Today we are taking a look at this ink. This is from the new line of Rohrer Klingner inks called SketchINK. This was sent out for review by Anderson Pens, so thanks very much for giving me this sample for review. I have attached a handy dandy paper hole reinforcement thing and colored it with this ink, so you can definitely see what color this is. Kind of like a weird murky brown green. This one's called Lilly, and these inks are all nanopigment inks, which means that they're supposed to be pretty permanent, really, sort of light fast and waterproof and all these kinds of things. And they actually have pretty good flow. I was a little bit worried about these because you can't see it in this one, but in maybe a little bit right here, if the camera picks it up. There you go. Those little yellow lines down there, there's a little bit of nanopigment settling sometimes in these inks, and so I was a little worried about them working well in a range of pens. I figured they work fine in broad, big, wet nibs, and they do, and I was a little bit worried about the fine nibs. So I used them in these two pens. These are two fairly different pens, but both from Pilot. On the big end is this one. This is the Pilot Custom 74, and this one has a medium nib. The medium nibs from Pilot I have found to be pretty broad, and this one I've tuned up to be extra wet. So this one is great for this ink. The only problem is that it tends to make it bleed a little bit just because I'm putting a lot of ink on the page. But I wanted to make sure this ink flowed well. So I tried it in this one. And then this is a Pilot Kikuno. If you're not familiar with the Kikuno, it's the pen with the little smiley face on the nib. There it is. What a happy little nib. The thing about this pen is that it is a fine, and the Pilot fine is serious about being fine. There's a huge difference in line weight between the medium and the fine. So I was a little worried about this one being clogged up, but it's also a pen you can take apart very easily, and so I decided to give it a shot. So I have it in a really big wet medium and a very, very fine and slightly dry-ish fine. So let's see how that turned out. Here is the written review, and you can find more of this and pictures over at inkdependence.com if still photos are also your thing. Here is the sort of swatch, and I think this came out pretty well. It's a cool looking ink, and it's why I decided to try it first. I haven't tried any of the rest of them, so I can't tell you about the whole SketchINK line yet, but I am going to try more because I like this one kind of a lot. I said the flow is fairly wet based on these two pens that I've had it in. This is my normal Rhodia paper, which generally performs very well. And as you can see, no bleed through or anything like that going on Rhodia, of course. There is a little bit of bleed on the copy paper. So here's the front side of that copy paper. And you can see there's not really any feathering or spreading or any of that nonsense. On the back, you'll see, if I can get it in the frame here, you'll see that there is some minor bleed through here from the big nib. From the small one, though, a couple of little spots came through, but not bad, really. So this ink is a little bit on the bleedy side. If you're using substandard paper, I would say put it in something finer. Given that caveat, it performs very, very well. I didn't have any problems with the flow in these pens. And in fact, I've actually gone through a whole converter of this one, which is a very fine nib. So it's kind of a fair amount. As you can see, I really don't have much left of this sample. There's a little bit in there, but not much. Barely enough to, slosh around. As far as comments and that sort of thing, there really isn't any, there's no shading to speak of. This is a very saturated ink, which I like quite a lot. There's also no sheen, so if you're a sheen hater, this is going to be an ink for you for sure. And I would say you can use it in pretty well any pens. I've had it in these pens for quite a while. Actually, let's look at the ink journal notations and we'll see how long I've had it in these pens. One of the things you should do with these... here we go. With nanopigment inks is you should probably clean them out more often than average because they can become clogged. That's at least a thing I hear, but I've actually never experienced it. I keep a nanopigment Sailor Black in one of my pens. It's a fine nib, and I keep it in there. It's the only ink that's ever been in there, and it's in there perpetually with no problem. So I'm not particularly worried about these anymore, honestly. I haven't tried to clean them out yet, so I don't know if there's going to be any staining, but looking through the converter window there, it looks like it's gonna be fine, so I'm not too worried about it. Here it is on this paper, and I've had it in there, as you can see, since the beginning of March. There we go. You can see quite a lot of difference in these two, in the look of these two things, but it is Tomoe River. This is an ink journal, And these nibs are very, very different, as I said. So look at the line weight difference between the fine and the medium that I have here. So keep that in mind if you're looking for pilot pens. There's a big jump. And then again, not a very big jump from medium to broad, oddly enough. The medium is very broad, and the fine is very, very fine. So that's Tomoe River. Here it is on wheat paper. This is an Inky Fingers Currently Inked journal. And let's find the right page. There it is. So, whoops, now you can't get them both on the page. Let's go ahead and back out just a little bit. There you go. And you can see there's a little bit less difference here. The line weights are still much different, but the colors are more in line just because the ink soaks in better on these papers. Also, I've got to say this SketchINK stuff dries pretty well. It doesn't have a long dry time on it either. It's not instantaneous, but it's not that long even on the Tomoe River, I don't think. So definitely a thing to keep an eye out for. These bottles of SketchINK. One thing about the bottles is that some of them, like, they have these illustrations on them, and I don't have one to show. I'll find a picture online and throw it up here, here-ish, and I'll show you. But there's, they're not exactly work safe, so you might want to sort of decant these guys if you're going to take them to work with you, at least as a bottle. Let's go ahead and do a water test on this guy. Look at the chromatography, and then look at a bunch of ink samples because I have ink comparisons because I have a bunch of those to show. All right, so here comes the water. Go ahead and get some in here on this text. There we go. I'm actually expecting pretty good performance here because these are nanopigment inks and they're supposed to be pretty water resistant and light fast. And sure enough, I don't really see any changes going on here. So we'll see what happens when we wipe it away, but so far so good. Yeah, like maybe a little bit of like greenish blue there, I guess, but did I get it all? I did. Yeah, nothing. This is yeah, rock solid. So good job there. So this SketchINK stuff, definitely I'm going to say waterproof because I didn't even see any change. And if you look at the paper towel here, there might be a little bit of green blue there, but that might be a trick of the light as well. So hardly anything, if anything at all, came up. That is pretty cool. All right, so here is the chromatography. And then this is what you end up with. You had some movement here on the chromatography, but also as you saw, just sort of draw it on there and put it in the water. So it didn't really have a chance to set or anything like that. It's been on this paper for a week or so. And then, not a week? Yeah, about a week. And then, so you have a little bit of stuff left here, definitely some resistance. And then as it travels up the page, it pushes a lot of that green up it. But once it's set on that paper, it seems like it's pretty darn water fast. So this was one I would say use with confidence, and maybe check out the rest of this line because they are a bunch of cool colors. All right, let's look at some color comparisons here. All right, so here is Lilly. And I actually had a hard time figuring out what kind of color was close to this because this is a weirdo color. This is, of course, a color ring card. So I've got some, let's start with like greenish stuff and then go to grays because it's kind of like a green gray a little bit. Here is Franklin Christoph's Loden, which you can definitely see is more of a bluish greenish, I suppose, next to this one. And then here is Monteverde's Olivine. I don't know why I said Olivine Monteverde instead of whatever, but this is definitely more green. In fact, I think this is kind of unique in my collection. I don't think I have anything else in this color range, really. So we're going to be looking at stuff that's different. Here is Noodler's Army Green and Rohrer Klingner's SketchINK Emma. So if you're looking for a green, a much more normal color, this is a good foresty, piney sort of green, and it actually looks kind of close to Army Green and some of these others, I suppose, but neither are much like Lilly. Here is Sailor's Tokuwamatsu, which is another pine green, and then Diamine Salamander, which I actually thought was going to be closer, but Salamander is definitely more green. This is one of my favorite murky greens, and this one's kind of a very dark green when you get it in the right pens, but nothing close to Lilly, really. And then a couple of grays just for funsies. Here is, oops, there we go. This one. There we go. It's Monteverde's Black Documental. Black Documental is kind of a shiny gray, really, instead of being a black. I haven't tested this one out yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And then Mont Blanc Oyster Gray. And both of these have some of the same tones as Lilly, but are very, very different. They're clearly not in the same color family. But what is with that? I even looked at browns. I didn't find any browns in my collection that were even close, really. Maybe the new rubber duster motor oil or something, but I looked at Zhivago and El Lawrence, and they weren't really that close, so who knows. And then this one's a little bit close. Like, it's got some stuff in common in the low lights, but not a whole lot, really. And this is Faber-Castell Stone Gray, another great ink to try out that's got good water-resistant properties, but it doesn't really look like Lilly. So I think Lilly really stands in a place all her own and is definitely worth checking out. So go to your favorite Rohrer Klingner vendor. For me, of course, that is Anderson Pens, who provided this sample for review. Put it in your choice of pens. Go nuts. See what you got. And let me know what you think of these inks down in the comments below. Hit the like, comment, subscribe, etc. as if you haven't done so already. And thank you to all of my patrons out there for helping me support this endeavor of mine. If you haven't become a patron, please do consider becoming a patron so I can keep doing more stuff like this and go on pen shows and all that kind of jazz. I will see y'all in the next video. Peace out. Pretty cool, like pigmented sort of ink. Actually, I ought to check that out.